Hey gang, Sean here from the Commander's Brew. You know us, we're that podcast where we goof around and we like to have a bunch of laughs. Well, this week's no different, and we have another special guest, Andy Stilloff being a proud papa, and we have Ryan Paneff from the Commander Cookout Podcast. If you don't know the Commander Cookout Podcast, you need to check them out. They're a couple of hilarious Canadians just like us. We got Ryan here to give you a taste of that flavor, and not only that, I want you to remember to check out their Kickstarter for a Commander Cookout Podcast playmat and additional perks like dice, shirts, stickers, all kinds of great stuff. You must check it out. They're a great podcast, and this playmat is truly gorgeous. This episode's cool too. Brian brought us a wicked Elsha deck that's all about Dragon's Approach and casting them for cheap or for free. It's pretty spicy. Let's check it out. Brian, thank you for bringing us. This is so I'll introduce the commander and the theme. And then we'll, as usual, just to frame it for the listeners as well, we're going to ease into it. We're going to start with some of the vegetables, some of the, the basics that keep it running. And then we're going to get into the neat moves. And I would love it if you would give us the honor of introducing the neat moves segment when you're ready to. But this is a special deck. When you proposed this deck, I was like, this seems very cool. This is Elsha of the Infinite, the monk, 2 and a Jeskai, 2 blue, red, white, 3/3 prowess. I forget about prowess quite often. The main thing is you can look at the top card of your library, and if it's a non-creature, non-land, you can cast it whenever as if it had flash. But
as if it had flash. Never mind.
As if it had flash. Yeah.
Yeah.
The feature of this deck, if you were to describe this deck real quickly, this is a Dragon's Approach deck. Dragon's Approach is that Strixhaven common that's, a deck can have any number of cards named Dragon's Approach. It's a 2 and a red sorcery, and it does 3 damage to each opponent. That's crucial. Each opponent. Each. This is not possible if it's just target opponent or like one opponent. It would be impossible. But it does each opponent 3 damage. In addition, you may exile Dragon's Approach and 4 cards named Dragon's Approach from your graveyard. If you do, search up a dragon, put it into the battlefield, and then shuffle up. That means, so when one is resolving, if I understand this correctly, there has to already be 4 in the graveyard, and you cast the 5th one, and you exile this and 4 other cards named Dragon's Approach.
Correct. Yes, that's right.
Don't get too. I was like testing out. I was like, wait a minute, I have 3 in the graveyard. Shouldn't this be the 4th one? No, 4 and the one you're just casting. In any case,
that's right. And I'll add, it is a May ability. So if you had 5 or 6 in there already and you cast another one, you don't have to search for anything if there's some disadvantageous reason that you might not want to put a creature onto the battlefield. You don't have to. That's a great point. Yes. Yeah. And
so that's kind of the theme of it. And then, in terms of the basics, the vegetables, the one I want to definitely mention is Thrill of Possibility. I think this style of draw card is so perfect here. It's 1 in a red instant. I mean, it could be a sorcery, right? Because Elsha, as long as it's on the top, we can cast it. But as an additional cost, you discard a card. So I'm happy to discard a Dragon's Approach if I'm 1 away from getting the 5 or something like that. So I love these types of includes for sure.
Yeah, and you know what? It might as well be a sorcery because I'm also playing Tormenting Voice and Honor the God Pharaoh and Faithless Looting. And I used to play Wild Guess, which is the same card, sorcery, but instead of red 1, it's red. I used to be playing that, and I am playing all of those because discarding a card in this deck, Dragon's Approach, and it has Past in Flames, which lets you cast stuff from your graveyard. It doesn't matter. It's just, it makes, like black makes the graveyard an extension of your hand, this deck in Jeskai colors also does that.
Yeah, red is very good at doing that as well. Past in Flames particularly the one that gives each incident sorcery flashback in your graveyard. And it has flashbacks, so even if you've milled it or if it's gone in sometimes, that's a fun deal.
Now, I will preface everything that we're talking about with I'm not playing Underworld Breach.
Okay. I was wondering.
Also, to that point, this deck isn't, I don't know, air quotes, maximized or optimized, right? I understand that things like Torbrand or damage doublers, damage triplers, more mana production, and things like Underworld Breach would be good in this deck, but I don't want to push it over the threshold of, I need a 17-page law-abiding Rule Zero contract and have to get down on my knees to make you believe that it's not that Elsha deck, because Elsha already kind of has a Boogeymander stigma of being a CEDH deck, because there are a bunch of top-of-library infinite combos with Elsha, none of which I'm playing in the deck because I still want to be able to sit down in an LGS or a Magic Fest and just play. This is my Elsha Dragon's Approach deck. And people kind of get their hackles up. Oh, what do you mean? No. It's trust me, it's not that. It's not Sensei's Divining Top. It's not cast stuff for free infinitely. It's not mill my whole deck Lab Maniac or Thassa's Oracle. It's none of that. It's truly a Dragon's Approach deck. And it does employ a lot of the tricks of Dragon's Approach, but doesn't really use Elsha to do that other than to cast more Dragon's Approaches.
Yeah. I mean, I love this philosophy, right? I do think that this is a personal take, right? Fun is relative. Everyone has their own version of fun. I'll say what I don't find fun first. I don't find it fun if a deck is designed to do the exact same thing every time. I realize there's a little irony because we're going to be casting a lot of Dragon's Approaches, but that's not what I mean. I mean, like, yes, what I think you're describing is there's a version of this deck that wants to do Dragon's Approach that is so good at keeping a Dragon's Approach on top, and Elsha just lets you cast them over and over and over for free, so that once you get it set up, you're done. But that's not this. This deck has the potential to do some very powerful things, but you got to kind of get a bit lucky. You got to have a little negotiation powers. You have to kind of engineer it yourself as opposed to it just being handed to you, which I love.
Yep.
I love a deck that can explode, but you got to work for it. And then it feels earned.
I'll back you up even by saying there's not a whole ton of the free protection, the fierce guardianship, deflecting SWAT, pact of negation, force of will, mana drain. None of that's in this deck, which you would find in the normal Elsha CEDH deck.
Right.
And all of the political prowess that I need to say, oh, I don't know, don't attack me, I just have my commander. Or, hey, I don't know if I'd kill my commander because I can kill that thing next turn, what have you. I have to use all of those kind of supplemental magic skills because I'm not playing the stout like counter and deflecting removal package that the CEDH Elsa deck would be playing.
Right.
And that's because I got to make room for 20 some Dragon's Approaches.
23, I believe, are in the list you sent me.
Yeah, and you know what? I've only played this deck 6 or 8 times, and I think that number should be 24, 25.
Okay.
Because I find maybe I don't quite find enough Dragon's Approaches to have them in my hand to cast them and scry, or cast them and draw a card. Or I run out of Dragon's Approaches and card draw spells if I have Elsha out, and I brick on the top of my library with a land. And I don't have a fetch land on the battlefield to shuffle.
Yeah.
So there's all these little subtle nuances that say, hey, 1 more, maybe 2 more over the course of like the 60 or 80 games in the course of a year that I'll play. Like in 2022, maybe I'll play this deck like 60 times. If I had 2 more Dragon's Approaches, it would be like, oh, okay, you win a couple more games. You feel a little bit better about where the deck's at.
Right.
And not being a CEDH deck, being a casual deck that I want to keep in kind of that better than Precon, but less optimized than Fringe CEDH range. I want to be able to keep it in there, and it takes 60 to 80, 100 games a year with the deck, losing and winning, to say this works, this doesn't, this is too good, this isn't good enough, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. I'm very grateful. Do you mind if we put a link to the deck list that you sent me?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, we'll put a link to that, and you can do yourself. I'm so grateful that you're willing to do this level of testing. Some of us trade in decks much faster than that. So the change of, like, I don't know if I've played 60 games with a single Commander deck ever. I just change them up way too much. I see a new one, I want to play it, and then I see the next new one, and I want to play that one.
And you know what the thing is about it is, like, when we get to the budget section, we see some of the cards that aren't considered, air quotes, budget cards. It's because I have all these cards, right? And because I have a deep collection, I've been playing Magic for 20 years, that I can just pull what I need for the deck and not damage the equity of my collection to not so bad that I'm not able to build other decks, that I can keep something like this together, which realistically is a kind of a meme deck, right? 20 whatever Dragons approaches, right?
23. Michael Jordan.
Oh, hey, LeBron James. I mean, head to head, right?
Yeah.
Who's the best of all time? Michael Jordan, Dragons approach, or LeBron James?
Yeah. Which one is the GOAT? Well, we should measure by which Space Jam movie is the better movie.
Oh, I'm sure lots of people just... You touched a nerve. You touched a nerve there. I guarantee it.
I'm sure I
guarantee it, because there's people like between my age and your age who are like, oh, the Michael Jordan one. And then there's like people who watched Space Jam with their kids with LeBron, and they're like, oh no, this is way better. My kids love this movie. I just put it on and leave.
Yeah. My kids ask me, who's that guy? It's like, well, that's Bill Murray. I don't have time to explain it, but he's a comedy great.
Bill Murray, never heard of her.
Amazing. Right. I love guests as well, because, you know, we don't put any budget restrictions on our guests. I'm glad you didn't feel the need to change anything. And, you know, in the scope of playing Commander, it's about having fun. And, you know, if your deck needs a few expensive cards to have fun, so be it.
You know what, though? We don't, because you did the math on it already. You did the math.
Yeah.
And we can just eliminate some of the expensive cards out of this deck, and it'll run 99% the same. Up to and including, I've never cast one of the expensive cards in this deck because I've only ever played it 6 to 8 times, so it might as well not even be in there. It could just be a Dragon's Approach, right?
Right.
Which is... well, it's like an uncommon or whatever, and it's like $2, or it's a common and it's like $2, but it's not $70 like one of the cards we're going to talk about that could just get cut, right?
I do want to bring up Ruby Medallion. This is one of the more expensive ones, but it's instead of just giving us red mana, it says that red spells cost 1 generic less. And specifically, I think this is so useful. Our aim is to cast a bunch of Dragon's Approaches. Going from 3 to 2 is great, and, you know, maybe we can get it cheaper with some other things. And, you know, I feel we've spent a good deal of time on kind of the engine, like the boring parts, just getting cards and casting them. But let's get into some of our neat moves.
Working on an effing neat.
Let's start with the neat moves of some of the various types of ways you've put into the deck to make casting Dragon's Approach a little bit cheaper. We already mentioned Ruby Medallion. What are some other ways we are going to do that?
Yeah. Well, there's like 6 or 7 of them, right? Ruby Medallion's one. Semblance Anvil is another one where you would exile a non-land card from your hand when Semblance Anvil enters the battlefield. And then spells that share a card type with the exiled card cost 2 less. So you would cast Semblance Anvil for 3 mana and just say, oh, this Dragon's Approach, see you later. I got 20 whatever more of them. And now all my Dragon's Approaches are lightning bolts. Literally lightning bolts when you have Elsha, because she lets you cast sorceries at it as instants. Red, 3 to everybody. Look at the top. Red, 3 to everybody. Look at the top. Red, 3 to everybody. Look at the top. Land. Crack this fetch land. Shuffle. Red, 3 to everybody. Right? It just lets you dig and dig and dig and dig and dig. And when people figure it out, it's like, oh yeah, we got to get rid of that now.
Yeah.
And there's a couple others that are like that. There's Goblin Electromancer, everybody's favorite goblin, makes instants and sorceries cost less. Jace's Sanctum is an enchantment that does it and lets you scry whenever you cast an instant or a sorcery. So
Jace's Sanctum is a premium one so that you can, again, help manipulate the top of the deck.
Yeah, and Burning Prophet is another one like that. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it gets +1/+0 and scry 1.
Oh, but,
other cost, super good. That's underrated, man. I'm telling you, scry 1. Another one, Burgie, cast a red spell, get a red mana. So if your dragon's approaches are reduced by 2, and you spend red and then get red, they're free. So as long as you can look at the top and or shuffle, you can cast them all. So you could go off, and if you had some way to infinitely manipulate the top of your library or shuffle, you could actually cast every Dragon's Approach in your deck, and or if your graveyard was full and you had a Underworld Breach. Sure. But that's not something that I want to do, right? And we already talked about that.
Well, and then in an Elsha deck, though, like, when would you ever consider casting the back of Burgie, the Horn of Bounty, so that you can, like if you saw the top card and you're like, well, that's not a Dragon's Approach, that's another way to get digging, because then, you can just exile 2 cards, hopefully find 1 or more Dragon's Approaches, fire those off, keep it rolling.
I have cast the Horn of Plenty, and it just lets you dig. A lot of the times you cast draw, and then Jessica's Will, for example. I'll make 6 mana. Flashback my Past in Flames, draw, Horn of Plenty, Burgie, the backside of Burgie. Discard, draw. Like it lets you dig pretty fiercely.
Yeah.
And it's Burgie's very powerful. I don't think that's a secret.
No.
And she's good in here just because she makes mana. So is Neheb the Eternal, right? Like there's a few cards that I have in here just to make mana, right? And those are the same cards that Storm decks lean on to just infinite cast their whole deck. Like Stormkiln Artist, Runaway Steamkin, Neheb the Eternal, Jessica's Will, Mana Geyser. You get a red for each tapped land your opponents control.
That's right.
You start your turn and just say, I'll make 25 mana, right? But a couple of the other neat moves, the cost reducers, these are ones that you don't normally see in Commander. You've got Locket of Yesterdays. This is an artifact for 1. And it says spells you cast cost 1 less to play or cast for each spell with the same name in your graveyard.
I saw this card in the list and I was like, oh, this must be...
What is that?
This must be from one of the new Commander precons that just came out, and I haven't had a chance to really familiarize myself with. It's like, no, this goes way back to Time Spiral. But as a Commander player, we never think about it because it's supposed to be a singleton format. So, of course, nothing has the same name in our graveyard except now.
Oh, man. Well, if you like that kind of thing, there are a whole bunch of any number cards, right? Like Relentless Rats, Rat Colony, Persistent Petitioners, Dragon's Approach, and Shadowborn Apostles. I got 3 more for you. These are the 3 more neat moves. We've got Council of the Absolute. Enters the battlefield, choose a non-land card. Choose a creature or land card. Your opponent's
non-creature. You name a non-creature, non-land card name.
Oh yeah, what did I say?
I think I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
I got confused.
Doesn't matter.
You, not a creature, not a land. Your opponents aren't allowed to cast spells with that name. That's no problem. But when you cast a spell with that name, it costs you 2 less to cast. So obviously we're going to name Dragon's Approach. So that, again, it costs us 1. There's a lot of ways to make it cost 1. It almost seems like you might get overwhelmed with like they can't get cheaper than 1.
There used to be, I think I actually cut a cost reducer because it was like, made your things cost 1 less and it cost 3 mana. I kept all the costs 2 less, and I kept all the cost 1 less that cost 2 mana.
Right.
And then I kept Jace's Sanctum.
Some magical key. Cloud key? Is it cloud key? You pick something and it's cheaper?
Yeah, you choose a card type, and cards of that type are less.
Yeah.
And I did think about cloud key, and there was a couple more. There's lots of cost reducers.
Well, can we go back to, just for a second, Stormkiln Artist? This is another way, like this and Bergie are the ways that I found to make it actually cost quote unquote nothing, because you're going to get paid back into mana when it costs 1 mana by casting it. The Stormkiln makes a treasure in this case instead of directly making red mana. But so as you can see, it's not that hard to make it so they're free. And now it's just a matter of like, how much can I draw? How much can I look at the top of my deck? How much can I move stuff around? Adjusts to taste.
Yeah. And I'm playing Pyromancer Ascension, which when we can make them all free, we cast them. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, if it has the same name as a card in your graveyard, which it would, you put an Ascension counter on Pyromancer Ascension. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell while Pyromancer Ascension has 2 or more quest counters on it, you can copy that spell that you cast.
Yeah.
So if we've got a Dragon's Approach in our graveyard and we cast one, we get a counter. We cast another one, we get a counter. We cast another one. Now it's double Dragon's Approach every single time, which is just another card you don't see. Same with Harness the Storm. Enchantment again, like Pyromancer's Ascension. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, so there is a limitation, but from your hand, you may cast target card with the same name from your graveyard. Yeah.
And it doesn't exile. Like a lot of these effects will be like, well, and when you do, it's exiled forever. Like that's why it says hand, so that you can't infinitely cast the same one over and over. But this is a way where you might be like, ooh, I want to I've got enough in there in my graveyard that I can exile 10 and get a couple of dragons going. This is a cool card we never get to see because we play a singleton format. I want to point out too, Pyromancer Ascension lets you copy the spells, and Stormkiln Artist pays us for copying as well as casting. So
we would net mana off of that if Dragon's Approach is reduced.
I love it.
Super good.
I love it.
Super good.
Yeah, so cool.
We got a couple more, though. Yeah. Never mind. The fun's not over. Whirlwind of Thought and Vega the Watcher say whenever you cast a spell, or whenever you cast a spell from not your hand, draw a card.
Right.
Yeah. So if we can't scry, or if we can't shuffle, and we're casting Dragon's Approaches from our hand or from not our hand, we just draw cards. And that's a way to look one card deeper or continue the chain. Or if there's a Dragon's Approach on top of our library and we cast one from our hand, we can draw the one from our library and put it into our hand and see one card deeper. Maybe it's another Dragon's Approach.
Yeah. Well, and then I also want to point out, like, Elsha, if you run an Elsha deck, you're very familiar, but we always need like a little bit of a board wipe. I like to put one in every deck, but I don't like to put a ton in every deck because, creatures are a fun part of Commander, and I like that when they can exist in games. Terminus is perfect. I hadn't thought of this. I
didn't think of it either. Honestly, I didn't think of it either until I was just flipping through like my good white cards.
Yeah,
and I was like, what?
So it's not technically a board wipe. It's a 6-mana sorcery, but it has Miracle. So if it's the first card you draw in a turn, you get to play it for just a single white. And being able to look at the top, it's not, Elsha, I want to clarify, doesn't make the top of your library public. You get to look at it. So you'll always see that, like, oh, there's a Terminus coming, so I'll make sure to like cast it for Miracle. Put all creatures on the bottom of their owners' libraries. This is the best.
So if we have dragons, If we have dragons, we can put them back into our deck and then Dragon's Approach and find them again.
Amazing. But no one else has stuff.
No, and when we have things like Thrill of Possibility and Wild Guess and Faithless Looting that we can cast at instant speed because of Elsha, not only can we see the top of our library, but we can cast our sorcery speed draw at instant speed. And if Terminus is on the top, we can draw that on somebody else's turn, and Miracle allows us to ignore timing restrictions.
Wow.
It's so good. And there's so many little subtle nuances to the deck that I either haven't got to experience yet or I haven't even learned yet. Like the one card that I mentioned earlier that's $70, Dream Halls.
Yeah.
Never got to cast it. It's a reserved list card. That's why it's so much. Mm-hmm. And it's an enchantment for blue 3. Instead of paying the casting cost for spells of any color, has to be a colored spell, its caster may choose and discard a card that shares at least one color with that spell. So if I have a red card in my hand, I can discard it to cast another red card. And it doesn't say cast from your hand. So if I have something like Whirlwind of Thought that allows me to draw a card whenever I cast a spell, I can discard a Dragon's Approach to cast a Dragon's Approach from the top of my library, and then I draw a card. In all likelihood, that'll be a Dragon's Approach that I can then discard to cast the next Dragon's Approach. And you can dig through your deck like that. And when you have the Jace's Sanctum or the Burning Prophet, you can always scry wherever you can fit a trigger in, you can scry. So you can scry before you draw, for example, to put something that you don't want on the bottom and then draw. There's so many subtle little nuances that just make your brain hurt. Like, I usually only play this deck like once a night because it's like, what do I do? I
also want to point the thing that I think is so fun is, cards like Past in Flames, all of those other cards that make us casting red spells cheaper or, paying us back with Bergie or whatever. That doesn't matter that it's happening from the graveyard. So we can engineer a board where we're casting them for free out of the graveyard. And if you're close to that happening, if you see a Past in Flames, maybe you've got one in your hand, it might be worth not exiling them and just being like, I don't want a dragon right now. I'd rather leave them in my graveyard and cast them again for free.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember one of the first times I ever played the deck and I was getting windfalled, and the dude was like, he windfalled twice, or he windfalled and copied it or something. And he got my 1,000-Year Storm, and windfall was the third spell he cast that turn. So there was like triple windfall. And he got my Past in Flames, and he was like, oh yeah, awesome. Now you can't Past in Flames twice. And I was like, yeah, you're an idiot, because you just put like 25 or 21 Dragon's Approaches and other red spells into my graveyard. And I just went like, Mana Geyser, Past in Flames, get them all.
Yeah.
You're dead. It was so awesome. It was so fun.
Oh, so fun. So fun. Yeah. Is it too early? Can we talk about, there are 3 dragons in the deck. Each one has a distinct use and purpose, I think. Who do you want to start with?
Whomever. I like them all.
Okay. Niv Mizzet, Perun. It's the heavy color restriction one. The one that has no generic mana. Blue, 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 red, red, red. But for us, we're just going to exile 5 Dragon's Approaches total. Can't be countered. Flying. And whenever you draw a card, it pings any target for 1. And whenever anyone casts an instant or sorcery, like, I don't know, Dragon's Approach, you draw a card, which will result in 1 more ping. This is like... This is the most common one you probably pull, right?
No, it's not. No. But it does serve double function. It serves a function as adding, because when I cast a Dragon's Approach to deal 3, I draw a card. So it makes Dragon's Approach deal 4. Like Gutter Snipe does, like what's the Torbrand Thane of Redfell would do, like Rem Calaris does, adds damage when you cast spells.
Yeah.
Does that. but also it does what Whirlwind of Thought would do, or what Burning Prophet would do, or what Jace's Sanctum would do, lets me see one extra card. So it serves double functions, and it's a dragon that I just get for free for damaging my opponent.
Pretty good.
It's probably the least powerful of the 3 dragons that I get.
I mean, don't let
which is like,
hear
like
that.
Yeah, it's like, what? What?
Yeah. Well, if this is the less powerful, obviously,
I should say the less powerful, because I don't want to turn it into an infinite combo Underworld Breach deck, right? If I had Underworld Breach, then this might be better if I could discard more cards that I draw.
Right.
But the next one is Velomachus Lorehold, a 5/5 Elder Dragon, flying, vigilance, haste, white, red, 5. Whenever Velomachus Lorehold attacks, look at the top 7 cards of your library, and you can cast an instant or sorcery with mana value less than or equal to Velomachus's power from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library. So if you reveal a dragon with them, you can put it on the bottom of your library for your next Dragon's Approach search.
Yeah.
But also, you put them onto the battlefield, attack for 5 because it has haste. So you do 3 from your 5th Dragon's Approach.
Right.
Attack somebody for 5, reveal 5, and then get another Dragon's Approach. So at least 3 people are taking 6, and 1 person's taking 11.
Yeah, those are high numbers.
And then I've got a 5/5 blocker as well, because it's got vigilance. So this one, if I need a blocker and want to continue to do the damage game, it's very good. If the deck gets too streamlined, I would sub this out and put a red dragon in. A red dragon is from Adventures in Forgotten Realms. It ETBs and just does 4 damage to everybody. It's like Flame Rift, but on a creature.
Right.
And then the dragon I search for the most is Knoll Spine Dragon. This is the dragon I search for the most.
Right. This would be 5 red if you want to hard cast it, but we don't. It's a 7/5 with flying, and when it comes into play, you may discard your hand and draw cards not equal to how many cards you discarded. You draw cards equal to the damage dealt to target opponent this turn, which is probably up in the teens by now, or certainly at least 6 or 9, right?
6 or 9 is usually what it is. I've done 12 once, and I think of the 12, I ended up post drawing 12, 2 more Dragon's Approaches, then 2 more Mana Rocks, and then I had to discard a card from 8 to 7.
Wow.
Which, I mean, big deal, right? You do 6 more damage to all your opponents, and you cast 2 Mana Rocks, and you got to discard down to a measly 7 cards in hand, and you have a 7/5.
It's amazing. It's so fun. I can imagine your opponents, especially having seen it once, are just like, this deck comes out of nowhere. You think you're fine, and you're like, okay, I see a couple of Mana Rocks, Elsha's out, and that's it. I've got a healthy life total. It's not that
Elsha deck. We'll be okay, right?
Yeah.
And for first-time players, players that have never experienced this Dragon's Approach deck, I think that I try to sneak in a Dragon's Approach, turn 3, Dragon's Approach. Turn 6, Dragon's Approach, Mana Rock, or card draw spell, right? So to kind of ease them into it. But people who've played against the deck 4 or 5 times now, they're like, oh yeah, we know this deck. And I'll set my turns up, Mana Rock, card draw, Mana Rock, Elsha. No response, or Elsha Swiftfoot Boots, right?
Yeah.
And then on turn 5 or the next turn, it's Dragon's Approach, search for a dragon, draw cards. Right? You do try to have a mini storm turn when players are familiar with it, because they'll try to stop you from killing them all in one turn.
Oh,
and usually it takes 2 or 3 turns.
What a fun deck. So fun. Only 3 dragons, but that's all you need. It's Elsha's the perfect commander for this. Ryan, thank you this is such a creative deck. Shall we do a quick budget report?
Let's do it.
As we already talked a little bit about budget and stuff, but I don't ask my guests to do budget restrictions. And lands aside, I know the lands are such a they change the price of a deck so drastically with the least functionality change.
Yeah. Lands are jerks.
Lands are jerks. You put whatever lands you want from your collection. Spend money if you want. Don't spend money if you want. So this is the budget without lands comes to $450. However, and that, that's higher than average, but like $150 that's coming from a mana crypt. That's one of those like tables. Either your meta plays with these or you don't. So if you want to get into this deck and you don't have one, your meta probably doesn't.
If you have Mana Crypt in your deck, then it's a CEDH deck. But if you don't, then it's not. That's a thing that I think has crossed people's minds in the past. Yeah. Really quick on the lands though. Really quick.
Oh sure.
Fetch lands are so good for this deck because they allow you to shuffle. But like Scalding Tarns, Arid Mesas, any of the white inclusive, blue inclusive, or red inclusive ones, of course, are expensive. Prismatic Vista, expensive. But Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wilds, kind of Fabled Passage are all pretty affordable. And Ghost Quarter allows you to Ghost Quarter your own land and then find a different land so you can shuffle, but you're like even on mana. And then Field of Ruin, which allows you to destroy a land and everybody searches for one. So you could Field of Ruin, and that's an affordable card as well. I just wanted to maximize ways that allowed me to shuffle, and fetch lands, air quotes, fetch lands, even if they're Terramorphic and Evolving Wilds, are fetch lands in that they let me shuffle. So you don't have to spend whatever Scalding Tarn is worth. Yeah. You can just play those cheap ones, right? You're not trying to break any land speed records.
We could do panoramas too, and what's the other one I'm thinking of? You have to get two
Myriad
of the same
Landscape.
Type. Myriad Landscape. There's lots of cheap ways to get. I mean, we know why fetches cost so much because it costs you nothing to do it. But again, great point. The more fetches you can put in, the better. So let's say you're not running Mana Crypt. Let's say you don't run Dream Halls, which is that reserve list card. That's a $70 card. Really, after that, if you knock those off, your biggest expense is those Dragon's Approaches. They're like $2.50, $3 a piece now. All of these cards that say you're allowed to put as many as you want shoot up in value because Commander players drive a lot of prices.
So many of them, right? You need so many of them.
Yeah,
and you know what? Listen, you know what? You cut Jeska's Will, which makes you mana. Yeah, and you put in like a what is it? A Seething Song. Red 2 gets you 5 red, so you can just Dragon's Approach all day. That's what's a Jeska's Approach, like $15-$16.
Something
you could cut the Velomachus Lorehold and you put a red dragon in. You're trading a mythic. You're trading a mythic for like an uncommon. You're going from $8 or $9 down to 50 cents, right? There's all kinds of ways to cut value without changing what the deck does.
Yeah, and I think
Red Dragon, seriously, I think that's a good include in a Dragon's Approach deck because it's like casting another Dragon's Approach.
I think so. And just like if you just don't want to think about it and you're too confused, just cut the cards you can afford and just add cheap draw spells or some cheap removal. And you're good. The deck's fun. You're still going to play it. I might even, like we did a deck a while back that used a lot of Crypt Rats. And we try to think of like what's a good substitution if you don't want to shell out for the Dragon's Approaches. What's a good 3-mana sorcery red that would? I'm gonna look one up. Give me a second.
You know what? I got a couple here. You could do a Furnace of Wrath, which is red 1, doubles all damage dealt to everybody. So now the Dragon's Approaches you do have deal 6. You could do Torbrand, Thane of Redfell. All of your red damaging things deal 2 extra. You could do Flame Rift, which is 4 damage to every person. And then if you're going to run a couple rituals like the Seething Songs and the Burgies and the Cost Reducers, you could run Earthquakes and you could run like damage everybody things because guaranteed your opponents are going to have less life than you. And if your opponents are all sitting around 10 and you've got like 10 mana and you're at 20, Earthquake, boom, win the game.
Yeah. No, I love that. I guess I more meant if you want to proxy it, what substitute card costs a couple pennies that is like close enough to remind you that's like, oh, this, I don't have 23 Dragons Approaches. My proposal is Bathe in Dragonfire, because it's a 2 and a red, it's a 2 and a red sorcery, and it's mostly, you know, it's a kind of mostly yellow picture, which is similar to Dragon's Approach. There's a dragon in it. It's called Dragonfire. You just got to remember what the real text is, and just say like,
man,
these are from Battle Bond.
You just slayed me with that. That's so good.
These are from Battle Bond. They're 4 cents each. You just get 23 of these. So now the budget is actually quite cheap.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. It's got dragon in the name, sorcery, same cost.
Yeah,
and just have like one Dragon's Approach, kind of like a checklist card, right? Or a token placeholder card, or a manifest or a morph card for when you play one face down, you remember what it is.
Yeah,
you just have it in your token box and say, here's what Dragon's Approach does. Here's, what is it? Bathe in Dragonfire?
Bathe in Dragonfire. That's just what I came up with.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, fits perfect. That's like cut, print, check the tape. Like done.
yeah. I love doing that. Yeah. So I mean, we've got it down to a budget deck. This is super fun. Man, Ryan, this is flown by. It always does when we have guests talking about exciting decks. I don't want the listen. In case you don't also listen to CCO podcast, you certainly must. You must do that. You and Brendo are so fun, but also, is there anything else you've got going on that you'd like us to listen to? I know you've got other podcasts going on as well.
Yeah, you know what? There's such a huge amount of stuff that we've been working on for a long time. We've got Commander Cookout Podcast and Commander Cookout on YouTube, which is the cast, the video cast. We do top fives and some other just Magic adjacent type stuff. But Commander Ad Populum is another one that people say, oh, that's you too? Yeah, Commander Ad Populum. And it's kind of how Magic and Commander kind of translates into real life, or vice versa. Lots of Magic adjacent topics that have to deal with, you know, how Magic has helped me grow up, become an adult, or how I problem solve in Magic, how it translates into the real world, or vice versa. There's that. It's a lot of fun. We look at a lot of older Magic sets for the players that haven't been around for 600 years like me. We, on Commander Cookout, we just as of today went live with a merchandise campaign. So you can go to commandercookout.com or watch any of the stuff from CCO today onwards to learn about that. And we're going to kind of roll with that merchandising campaign to maybe start to fund in 2022, kind of like a mini, I don't want to commit to too much verbally yet, but a mini documentary series whenever we go to a Magic event. Yeah. Because so many players don't have the opportunity to go to Magic Fest Vegas, or they don't get to travel and go to Magic Fest Toronto. Is so expensive, right? Because Toronto travel tax.
Yeah.
We want to be able to document that and capture what a Magic Fest is, what a convention is, like Gen Con. It's the biggest gaming convention in the world. We want to do a mini documentary on that and show people why it's so awesome and why these events are so important, not only to the gaming community, but to our own personal CCO Nation is what we call it, right? All of the audience that is the collective Commander Cookout. So that's all the stuff that we've got kind of immediately that we've been really busy with lately.
Great. I mean, in any links you have for me, well, I'll put those in the show notes. Be sure to check those out.
Big time. Yeah. We're so excited to finally be able to offer like just merchandise and just stuff that people have been asking us for so long.
Yeah.
And with all of last year and just delays and not being able to meet with people and ship stuff and the added expense to all of that stuff. Like you already talked about at the start of the show, right? Like we don't got to rehash it out. But now that that's less than it was, we're ready to move on it, and it's going to be so fun. It's going to be so awesome.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I can't wait. Awesome. Ryan, a sincere FU from me and Andy. Thank you
definitely
so
an FU to Andy. He couldn't even show up. Like what could he be doing? He's probably sleeping. He's probably sleeping right now.
Yeah, he's probably sleeping.
Yeah.
Oh man. Ryan,
it's the easiest thing.
All my best to Brando, please.
Oh yeah, I will. I'm seeing him tomorrow. We're recording CCO, whatever number it is. I don't even know. I'll have to look at the notes. But huge thanks for having me. Always a ton of fun. Love to share a deck that so many people ask about week in and week out.
This is a fun one for sure. Thanks for bringing it. See ya, everybody. Thanks for watching. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting the show by going to patreon.com/commandersbrew.
And if you want to get any of the cards from our deck list,
that helps us out too. And for a free way to help us out, consider sharing the show with some friends. Like and subscribe, add a comment or two.
See you later.
Bye.